Oh my God. Welcome back, you guys, to the 10 Dimensions of Wellness podcast. It's been 5 years, you all. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And I am extremely excited to return. We are refreshed and ready to dive deeper into the world of wellness with you. I am your host, for all of you who don't know, Cammie Red. And this year, we're kicking things off in a huge way. We are gearing up for our next virtual wellness summit, which is on December the 14th. And to start this week, we are honored to have one of our VIP coaches who will sit on that VIP panel, Miss Jackie Scully. Jackie brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to the wellness space, and today she's here to share insight on her background, on who she is. Now, whether you are a longtime listener or new to our community, you are in for a treat today. So thank you for joining us on this journey to explore every dimensions of wellness. And let's get started with our guest, Miss Jackie Scully. Hi, Jackie.
Hello. Thank you so much, Cammie, for bringing me on your podcast and inviting me to be part of the Virtual Wellness Summit. I am so excited. Everything about my teaching, my background, my podcast and book is all about wellness. So I feel very aligned with your messaging, and I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I am so excited to have you. I thank you for being one of our first guests back. This is so cool.
Yay! It's awesome.
Let's jump right in, Jackie. My first question for you today is, can you tell us about your journey into emotional wellness and what initially inspired you to focus on this area?
Yeah, I would say since I was a kid, I was always a very emotional child, very sensitive. I consider myself an empath. And I didn't see a lot of spaces in school and in community talking about your emotional wellness and your EQ. And I think that's why I wanted to get into teaching. I really cared about kids and teenagers. And I didn't want to just talk about let's look at subject matter only, but really we need to look at how we flourish as human beings. And so I had a lot of my own kind of like spiritual path growth over the last few years where I tapped more into my emotional wellness and then started to really message that on my podcast and my book and now on social media, and really trying to be an advocate for education reform and bringing that type of kind of focus into schools and all those spaces. So I think it really stems from my own experience as a student and seeing like what was lacking in my own kind of spaces. And so that's kind of what brought me to this kind of work today.
Awesome. Now, you experienced a significant emotional transformation since 2020. What were some of the key moments that defined this journey for you?
Yeah, the pandemic, especially teaching during that time and being in many spaces, not only in the school I was at, but in a lot of virtual online groups where teachers were really burnt out. They were not taking care of themselves. And then they were looking at these children who were isolated, who didn't know how to have their own coping mechanisms with the stresses of the pandemic. And it just felt like we were all kind of in this despair. And it was really, really sad. So I kind of had to go through my own kind of dark night of the soul in 2020 and 2021 to really discover that I wasn't taking care of my own self the way that I really wanted to see in others too. So then I started going into doing more inner work and my spiritual growth in 2022, which led to my podcast, The Teacher Story. And that was my first podcast where I just wanted to hold space for people to share what they have been through and what they want to see change in education. And really, that became like part of this emotional wellness. It was a healing journey for myself and for so many teachers and other people in education that came on my podcast. And I did that for the last 2 years. And so many people wrote into me saying that they were able to really be themselves and they were sharing emotions that were pretty raw in a platform such as this, where thousands of people can be listening to your message. And I just felt like it was time. It was time for us to come out of the pandemic and say, we have these stories and we have these journeys we want to share with you. And it allowed for so many people to connect with one another.
I love that. I love that. I want to first, let me, before I move on to my next question, I want to just give you kudos and accolades for being a teacher. That is a job that is selfless and that you probably don't get as much recognition and reward from, but just thank you for being here for our
Thank
kids.
you.
I remember what it was like in 2020. I was working in a very small town in Texas as a nonprofit executive director. And one of my goals in that town, because not everybody, like you stated, was connected to the internet, and these kids were very isolated. A lot of our children in the town that we worked in did not have access to the internet. So that was
Yeah.
one of the things that we worked on, an initiative of getting started, was making sure everyone had broadband and internet connection, because in that area, imagine being isolated, whereas some, and not having that connection at all, whereas some places the little connection that people were getting were through the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my next question for you is, how did your background as an educator influence your approach to emotional wellness and intuitive truth guiding?
Yeah, so I have taught psychology for a long time. And so that was kind of my, I think, lead into really starting to focus on emotional wellness and really looking at EQ, your emotional intelligence. And I often would say to my students and to others, like, this is really something that should be a priority over IQ, right? We're kind of moving away from that idea of like, well, I have this IQ score, or I'm gifted, or I'm this and that. And it puts people in boxes and it really attracts kids and attracts people. But your EQ is what makes you function in the world, to have healthy relationships, to tap into your own emotions, to regulate your emotions. There's a lot of businesses and companies now that when you apply for a job, they're going to give you some kind of inventory or survey to take to see kind of what your EQ is, especially if it's a company where there's a lot of collaboration, which most work today is collaborative. And the work that we're going to see moving into the future is going to be all about collaboration. So your EQ is actually really important. The Intuitive Truth Guide and kind of this messaging I've been doing with Speaking Your Truth came out of another podcast that I co-host with a friend, Jessica Maidenford, called The Intuitive Teacher. And we talk all about your intuition, tapping into that, which is your intuitive teacher, your guide within you, your wellness. We talk a lot about spirituality. And the idea is to tap into what's true to you. And I had to kind of walk through the fire myself to figure that out before I can help lead others, because I didn't always speak my truth. I felt like I kept a lot in and didn't stand up for myself, or didn't really see my light and my potential until really like closer to 40 years old. You know, teaching is an identity that I have, it's a title that I have, but it's not my whole essence. And I think that's what people often see themselves as, just their career, or they often see themselves as one thing in their career, when really you have so much untapped potential. And that's really your intuitive truth of like, who am I? What's my essence? And what I discovered is my essence is really about being a speaker and being a motivator and being a mentor for others. And that I'm doing this alongside of you. Like, I didn't just like all of a sudden, like, I hate the word expert. I am not an expert in anything, but that we are always kind of working on our own self growth as we are working with other people to help them. And I think that is a really great coach, is that you can show what you've gone through and that you also are doing this alongside the people that you are wanting to serve and help.
I love that. Your focus on EQ and SEL in education is inspiring. How do you believe these tools can transform traditional learning environments today?
Yeah, I mean, my vision is to see kind of, at least to start, a 50-50 kind of profile for schools where we're not tossing out the subjects. We're not saying math, science, the humanities, that's not a focus anymore. But I think we need to have like a 50-50 approach where there's subjects that you need to learn, and there's a certain level of like basic understanding most like kids, in order to be functional adults, should know. But the other 50% should be on EQ and SEL, social emotional learning, because again, that's what's going to make you a flourishing human. It's actually going to help you in the workplace. It's going to help
Yes.
you if you want to have collaborations. Like, I think more and more people are becoming entrepreneurs. You're working with a bunch of different people in the coaching industry, and that is very entrepreneurial mindset. And in the entrepreneurial mindset, you are going to be collaborative. You're going to be working with a lot of people, and your emotional wellness, your EQ is really important for that. And so we need to start with the kids and talking about that. This is just as important as the subject matter that you're learning. Now, if I'm going to be really truthful, I think it's more important. So I think your EQ and SEL and all that should actually take a priority over all of the subject content areas, because also kids can learn a lot of things on their own using the internet, right? We have chat.
Yes.
You could do a lot on your own. And maybe part of what our job is in schools as facilitators is just to help them decipher, use discernment. How are you looking at sources? But then spending that time of, what does it mean to tap into your own self, your inner work that you want to do, to be conscious human being? What does it mean to have healthy relationships? And you know what? Conflict is part of that. Like, conflict's not a bad thing. It's
Yes.
how we channel the energy in the conflict. Like, when we have difficult conversations, that's meant for your growth. I think we are in a society today where we are almost like, I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. It's going to ruffle feathers. And then we have this growing divide, and we're doing it in schools too. And we're doing this. This is a disservice to these children. And so that's part of EQ as well. And SEL is actually having civil discourse and teaching them that having conflict and having difficult conversations is not a bad thing. It's an important part of your self-growth as an adult.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to touch on when you were talking about that is the role that social media and the internet plays so heavily in these children's emotions and in their thinking all the way around. What are some of the most common barriers you see that people face when trying to improve their emotional wellness, and how would you suggest they overcome them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the biggest barrier is that our emotions are very difficult, and it could be hard for people to want to actually go through feeling it, especially if you're going through grief, you're going through sadness, you're going through anger, and they might just not have the tools of like, well, how do I do that and not feel like I'm going down a spiral of, now I'm depressed because now I'm actually bringing up these emotions of sadness or grief. And so I think the best way to go about it is to find the tools that work for you. So some of the things I offer in some of the videos that I post on TikTok and Instagram and like LinkedIn is that you need to find a space in your life and a way to channel those emotions. So like for me, walking in nature, journaling, guided
Yes.
meditations. Because if you're like, I don't know how to sit in quiet meditation because all of these things in my brain are going to come through and then I don't know what to do with them. But maybe a guided meditation, a great app is called Insight Timer. I use it all the time. And you can find ones for very specific things. So if you're struggling with like anger, or you're struggling with grief, you can go and type in like a guided meditation on grief, right? And they can be short. They could be 10 minutes long. And it could help just start to move that energy. But I would say first, maybe just write down on, a document or a piece of paper, like, what are the things that I enjoy doing that help me move some of that energy so I don't get stuck in it? Because if you just get overwhelmed by the emotions that you're having and you don't do anything with it, then it's actually going to stay inside of you. Like that energy is going to stay stuck in you. And that's the whole like chakra system and all of that. Like when you have dis-ease in your body, that's
Mhm.
because you have like energy that's stuck and you actually can't do anything with
Yes.
it. It's going to cause physical ailments, right? And
Yes,
those, yeah, your body's always talking to you. So
it
when you have
is.
physical ailments, like, yes, it could be also from the food and the drinks and the other things in our environment. But a lot of times too, it's tied to your emotions that you're like holding somewhere in that chakra system. And you
Yes.
just have to find a way to move it. And the more you do that and practice it, like I have found, it moves quicker and quicker each time, right? Like you're building a muscle. Like your emotional wellness, your EQ is like a muscle, just like when you're
Yep.
working out.
Yep.
And then that way it's going to get easier, and you're going to move something that's really an uncomfortable feeling much faster the next time. And you're like, oh, I could do this. This isn't that difficult. Yeah.
Yes. As a nutritionist, one of the things that
Mm.
I actually teach on is emotional eating. And I
Mm.
actually have a product, a journal that comes with one of my programs. It's 30 pounds in 30 days. But I include the journal because what I've learned is emotional eating is a part of everyone's life, and your emotional wellness actually affects the way you eat. It affects the way you think. It affects everything. So it's important to get out those emotions to figure out why you crave certain things, why you
Mm.
focus on eating certain things. So just like you said, it's all interconnected. Our
Mhm.
emotional wellness is connected to our physical wellness. It's connected to our mental wellness. It's connected to everything.
Yes, absolutely. I love that connection too. And yeah, journaling alongside working on like a new like diet program is
Mhm.
perfect, because you have to think about, why am I going towards this certain food, or what is it
Yep,
doing for me emotionally? And then you can actually process that.
absolutely. In your book, The Guided Teacher, you discuss your healing journey. Can you share a key lesson from your book that resonated deeply, that will resonate deeply with our readers or with readers?
Sure. The guided teacher, which sounds like it would be, well, it's kind of, it sits in two camps. It can definitely be just for teachers and about education, but it's also very spiritual and again about my healing journey. And I talk about my journey from being a child to entering the school system as a student and how that transformed me into wanting to be a teacher. But really, the healing part is kind of in the last part of the book. And it started with this sense of community, that you can't do this work on your own. And that's why I love this wellness summit and being a part of it, because it's all about community and the
Yes.
spaces that I've created, like with my podcast. And then on LinkedIn, I co-founded a group called the Teacher Circle, which is all about community and supporting each other. And the idea is that everyone that has helped me is part of that healing with me. Like not done this by myself. I've had friends who reach out, who give me tools, like someone told me about Insight Timer, someone told me about guided meditations. Like I didn't
Mhm.
have all of this, in my tool belt. And I didn't really have any of this in my tool belt until, again, like almost like 40 years old. So I write a lot about community. I give a lot of, I give my flowers to my community and the people that have impacted me in my book. And then I talk about this also with bringing this back to kids and to schools and other spaces, like your family home life. How do we build a sense of community and tap into that gratitude for the people in our life and what they do for you? Because when you have gratitude, that also is part of your emotional wellness.
Yes.
You really can tap into that sense of love for your people in your life and for community, and that you don't feel like you're in despair. Because when we're depressed, and I've gone through depression many times in my life, you feel like you're alone. You feel like the weight of the world's on your shoulders. You feel that no one is there to help you. But most of the time, we're doing that to ourselves. We're saying, no, I don't need help. No, this is my problem. No, I don't need anyone else to figure this out for me,
Yes.
because no, have people come, invite them into your life, have them help you, have them give you tools. And it's an energy exchange. You're going to be doing that for them. So when you are on kind of this other side of healing, then you can do that for others. So my book was also kind of that energy too. It's like I'm sharing a very personal and vulnerable story of my life. And that was huge for my healing journey, because just to put your words on paper that could be out there on Amazon and anyone around the world can read that, and it's
Yeah.
permanently out there, is a pretty scary thing. But that was kind of my, now that I've been working on that healing, my energy to others. And I've had many people write to me that so many different areas of the story touch them in some way, like, oh, I lost a friend in this way, or, oh, I remember feeling like this when I was in school, or like, oh, I remember, needing to call on community and didn't realize I had that until I was like, oh, wait, these people are coming into my life for a reason. So we can all do that for each other. And it is perfectly okay and really, really good to say, I need help. Can you help me? Your people will show up for you and they will help you. So that was like a huge part of the book in writing it. And then also within like the words in the book too.
Okay. Now, one of the things you have touched on and talked about so much, and you also stated in your book, is the importance of community and emotional wellness. Now, I'd love for you to go a little bit in depth and tell people how they can build a supportive community that fosters their emotional growth.
Yeah, so there's tons of resources and different groups online. If you're like, I don't really have physical community, a lot of my community that I kind of came into was online. So I mean, the pandemic was part of that as well. But now I'm trying to foster more like in-person community. I'm like, I really miss like people and seeing
Yeah.
people in person and really trying to get out in my local community. But LinkedIn was a huge part of it. And you would never think that. I never used LinkedIn the way that I use it now. I was always like, do I really want to go into these online spaces? And I just thought it was there to post resumes. And it really was, I started to see a lot of positive feedback from people. Like when you post something and share something that's very authentic to you, a message that you're giving, people will respond to that. They really respond to authenticity. So I would say find these different spaces. It could be Facebook, it could be Instagram. What you also put out onto the internet and into these social media spaces is what you're going to receive. So if you're
Right.
searching for a bunch of stuff on like Instagram or social media and you don't like it, don't follow those people or those groups. So like most of the things that I spend my time kind of engaging with is people who talk about wellness, people who
Mm-hmm.
talk about self-growth, people who are talking about mentorship. So things that are helping to foster and, you know, create more of my own emotional wellness. That's what you cultivate online. So there's a ton of virtual spaces and groups that you can find, whether that's again, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I just got on TikTok and I was like, well, I am not going there for the longest time because I thought it was just going to be like just bonkers. And again, you can shape it the way you want it to be. So since my messages are all about wellness and I follow kind of like the same type of people on Instagram, I look for them on TikTok and then it's cultivating a very positive experience for me on TikTok. You have a lot more control and power than you think. It's all about what you choose to, you know, follow, what you choose to speak about and what you choose to look for, and then you can create these wonderful virtual spaces of different support groups. And it happens over time. It's organic. It's going to start really small. And then as it builds, you're like, wow, I have all of these like great new friends. Like I have friends through LinkedIn. I wouldn't have thought that 3 years ago. Like, but like legitimate best friends from LinkedIn, from Instagram, from other spaces. And it's really like you kind of just have to step into having a little courage and getting your voice out there, whether you're just comfortable with writing posts, sharing pictures with motivational quotes, or if you want to start making videos. But when you do that, people will respond and you will start to feel that community and that energy from others.
Love it. Love it. Now, routine seems to be a cornerstone of your wellness practice. What are some daily habits you recommend for maintaining emotional balance?
Yeah, the routines are important. I just, through my other podcast that I do with my friend Jess, the intuitive teacher, we did a workshop series this summer, and we talked a lot about routines, rituals, spaces. So, what I do in the morning is, if you don't have a lot of time, and right now, like I have a little bit more time than I used to have on my hands, but I do a kind of like morning mantra in the shower,
Love
prayer,
it.
meditation, whatever you want to call it. But I use affirmations and go over different things that are going to help give me that positive kind of like start of the day. So I always say things like, whatever is for me will not miss me. And I'm, you know, in that kind of space right now, like, you know, looking to like build my motivational speaking and my branding and all of that. So I use that mantra a lot. I do say like prayers. I pray for people in my life. I always say like I'm open and ready to receive whatever I'm looking for to come into my life. So like community, if that's something that you want. And it just creates a mindset. And honestly, like doing that in like shower or you take a bath or whatever, if that water kind of cleansing, if you know, it kind of just, it's also part of that energy to like start fresh, start the day fresh. And then when you can, you know, I've had those busy days where I'm like, I am not getting to any downtime during the day, but at least take some kind of break when maybe that's lunch or after work. And again, it could be like a short walk, it'd be a little bit of journaling, or it could be a short meditation, like 10 minutes long, like if you wanted to do a guided meditation. But I try to do something after a very busy work day that's going to bring back that energy that I started with in the morning. So I think the opening and kind of closing to your day is really important. And then it also kind of sets the tone for how do you want your evening to be. I was always that person, especially coming home from school when I was teaching, that if I had a really stressful day at school, before I used these kinds of routines, I brought it home with me. And
Yeah.
that wasn't serving me and it wasn't serving my family. And then you feel more, you know, you feel like even more guilt because you're like, great, now I brought that energy onto other people that I love. And they, you know, they weren't even there. They're not part of this. So I think we do also have a responsibility. I think this should be worked into EQ and talking about this is that we do have a responsibility to work on our emotional wellness and manage it because we are affecting other people in our lives that we work with, in our family and our friendships. And people just don't want to be around like angry, sad people all the time. And people want to be
No.
around it either. So it is a responsibility as an adult. And that's why I think teaching it to children when they can still be a little maybe explosive or make mistakes, it's like, okay, you're kids, you're learning. But when we're adults, people just don't want to deal with that, right? They're like, you're an adult. You need to like manage your emotions and manage
Mm-hmm.
your stress and how you're talking to people. So opening, closing of the day, I think space in your home or wherever that is, maybe it is at work, however you want to create, I call it a sacred space. So like I'm in my home office right now, but this is also a space that I created with like beautiful flowers and plants and the colors that I enjoy. And I use essential oils and a diffuser. And so it's a workspace, but it's also a space I feel like I could relax when I'm ready to get off of the computer and maybe do my journaling
Yeah.
or do
Okay.
a meditation. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. What role does intuition, because I heard you mention earlier about the mantras and some of the things that you've been working with Jess, her name is Jess, correct? I'm
Yes.
saying that correct. Okay, with Jess Wood. What role does intuition play in our emotional wellness and how
Mm.
can someone start to connect to their intuitive truth?
Yes. So your emotions, I believe, is really the energy behind that intuitive truth. So when you are really listening to the emotions in your body, so like for me, I have noticed when I am really getting kind of like this feeling of an overwhelming kind of either sadness or it's like an overwhelming sense of even deep love, but I'm crying. That signals to me in my intuition that like I'm onto something. Something feels really true to me because I am being emotionally moved by it in some way, even if it's a difficult emotion. So I believe emotions are energy and they're giving you information. And that information is going to be tied to that intuition of like, so when I'm trying to make a decision, say, you know, I'm on a job search and I'm looking at something and I'm like, is this where I want to go? And I'm like, sometimes if you're just in your head, it gets really noisy. And then you're just like overthinking, overanalyzing. And I used to always be in my head more than in my emotions and my intuition. But then I just go and I sit and you just have to be a little bit quiet and have to think about what is my emotional state telling me? If it's like, I don't really, I feel kind of queasy, I feel kind of off about this, then maybe I'm not supposed to go with that job. Maybe I'm not supposed to go with that decision, you know, that I was going to make. So you have to almost like use it as energy, but you have to get quiet and still about it and see what is it providing to you. Following your gut is really important. Like, and I would say this to my students all the time.
Mhm.
They always would take like, you know, you take a test and I did this too. Like they scratched out like the answer that they're like, oh, that was what I was going to go with. That's what my gut said. I'm like, it's probably true. You probably
Yep.
should go with it. But you if you work on that again like a muscle, if you work on sitting with your emotions and then figuring out kind of like what is that telling me and you track it like journaling and you start to see patterns, then you're like, oh, this is a tool I can use. And so you don't just see your emotions as like, oh, I'm an emotional person, or these are difficult emotions. It's actually helping you figure something out. And
Yeah.
so listening to yourself and following that intuitive truth, and you're, again, I think your emotions are the energy behind it, is what's telling you, you got to do this, or you don't want to do this.
Okay. Now, what advice would you give to someone who feels disconnected from their emotions or struggles with the emotional self awareness?
I think the first thing is to start to work on some of these practices and these tools. Like, I honestly believe meditation, and again, guided meditation is the best way, because you can sit in some quiet, even if it's guided, and start to kind of pay attention. And then journaling afterwards, because then what you're doing is you're documenting
Yeah.
what came through, and then go back, read your journal maybe like the next day, and you have a different set of eyes on it, and then you're like, oh, I actually see how this is providing some information to me. And you just do this in little baby steps. So you do like a little bit at a time, maybe you do it a couple times a week or short amounts of time. And then it starts to feel like it's actually helping you. And then you're like, I can sit with these emotions because now I could see that it's helping me. I also find talking to people. So if you have even one person in your life, a good friend, a family member, that you can kind of be yourself with, you can have conversations with. If it's not something where you can have like a phone call all the time, what I do, and this is actually what my friend Jess and I do all the time, which led to our podcast, is there's this great app called Marco Polo, and we leave video like recordings. And so sometimes we don't need to just wait to like, we're both really busy and like, I can't talk to you for a half hour, but I'm going to leave you a video note, and it's like, it's getting it out of me.
I
And
love
then
that.
that way she can listen to it whenever she wants to listen to it. And if you don't have someone like that, I have often like left myself voice notes. So just again, if you want to do something really quick and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so frustrated right now, leave yourself a voice note on your phone, let it out, let that energy move out of you, and then go back and listen to it. And you're like, huh, okay, that's how I was feeling at that time. Don't really feel like that right now, but I'm learning something about that state. And so it sounds like you're talking to yourself, which actually is a sign of high intelligence, to talk
Yes,
to
it
yourself,
is.
talk through things. But you can also do that with, like, if you want to leave yourself a voice note, if you're not someone who's like, oh my gosh, I've so much that's coming through me and I don't want to write all this stuff down, or I don't have that person that I want to talk to. But those are, I think, kind of like three different ways that you can start to move energies, like the guided meditation and journaling. If you do have someone you trust to share some, personal things with, and if you don't have time or they're very busy to talk on the phone when you need it, say, hey, do you want to try out Marco Polo? Try out this like video app, or you want to just leave voice notes with each other on our text message. Um, and then you can start to do that. And then it just becomes like a great way to process. Or you can just do it and leave those voice notes for yourself and listen back to them. And it helps. And you have practice, over time, you're like, oh, this is actually working. And so then you actually want to have those emotional kind of like
Mhm.
energy moving and clearing.
All right. Now, several times before you mentioned the benefit of connecting with nature. What
Mhm.
impact has nature had on your emotional wellness journey?
Yeah, walking in nature, I think it's the oxygen you're getting from trees, the fresh air, listening to like the wind or the birds, maybe seeing like an animal, like squirrels or whatever animals you have in your area. I think it allows you to start to relax your nervous system and start to just like take deep breaths and feeling like you're just taking a break. But then you start to notice small things. And whenever I notice small things in nature, wherever my brain was before with all the clutter, it starts to just kind of quiet. And then I'm like, oh, wow, look at that beautiful like bird that just landed on that tree. Or like, look at those flowers on that tree.
Right.
And it kind of, it's not distracting in a bad way, but it does distract you from like that over analyzing and thinking. And then you can come back from like being in nature, whether that's walking, sitting in nature, and you might find that you're more in a relaxed state, and then whatever you were maybe struggling with, you could process it a little bit more. So even, if it's something you're having a difficult time tapping into an emotion, go for that walk, right? Just sit out in nature. They call this often in the spiritual world grounding, putting your bare feet in the grass, in the
Yes.
soil. That is actually also energy because you're getting energy from the earth. And, the earth is a living, breathing, you know, piece of life. So
Yes,
that's
it
giving you
is.
energy as well. Whenever I put my feet in the grass, it always reminds me of when I was a little kid. When you're like a little kid, you're always like running around with no shoes on, right? So
Yes.
it's like, and little kids are just, they're vibrant and they're bubbly and they're happy. And like, cause a lot of times they're doing, things where they're in nature and they're enjoying it. And so, yeah, I do find it very healing, but it's fresh air. It's just, again, listening and paying attention to something else than what's just all going on in your brain at the time.
I get it. I practice grounding and spending a lot of time in nature the same way you just stated. My son, my parents are always asking me, Mom, why are you outside with no shoes on? And I literally tell them because I love it. I love putting my feet in the grass. I love sitting in the sun and soaking up
Mm,
the energy from the sun. I love just being outside and relaxing my mind, sitting in
yeah.
stillness for a few moments. So
Yes.
I get it. I understand it. Now, let me ask you this. How do you see the relationship between emotional wellness and what you just mentioned about spiritual wellness or spiritual growth? Are they interconnected in your experience?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, at least from my own personal experience, because when you are going through some heavy emotions and you are actually taking the time to work through them, I think you are growing spiritually because you are becoming more self-aware and you are then able to see your interconnectedness with other people. Because when
Yes,
you're more self aware, I think then you're more aware of other things in your life. And part of that, again, is gratitude. I think gratitude's a big part of spirituality. Just being grateful to be alive, being grateful for anybody or anything in your life that is giving you love and joy, even when things are really, really rough. There is always something I think you can lean into that you can be grateful for. I remember during COVID, especially in the lockdown. And it was terrifying, and you're watching everything on the news and what people were struggling with. Like just taking deep breaths when I was able to, I was like, I am so grateful for these deep breaths that I can take. Like you don't ever really think about that, but you're like
mhm.
seeing people, struggling to breathe and, dying in hospitals. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm breathing and I can take these deep breaths and feel my health. So I do think when we're tapping into those emotions and we're self-aware and then we're aware of other things, we have gratitude, and that's part of your spiritual growth. And spirituality can be just the sense of being connected. I don't think you have to believe in like God or source or universe. There's lots of different names people call it, but I think ultimately you feel connected. Like you feel connected to people and the world, to something bigger than just you. And when you do that, then it's actually easier to go back and deal with your emotions. So I think it's cyclical. It's kind of like they feed each other.
Yes.
So you're like, oh, now I feel this interconnectedness with nature, with people. I appreciate them. I appreciate that I can breathe. Oh, so when I'm really struggling with a rough emotion, that's still valid, but now I can go and see like, okay, there's something bigger than just like this one thing that's really difficult that I'm
Yes.
struggling with. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so your curriculum, Connected Consciousness, focuses on holistic education. Can you describe what holistic education means and its benefits?
Yeah. So, holistic education is really looking at the whole person, right? And so, going kind of back to that like 50-50 model I was talking about, but we need to be looking at again our EQ, our connection to our community, our service. So, connected consciousness was something that came to me through my own healing journey, but I do this as it's very structured as like a curriculum would be. It's a 6-part unit, 6 units, and you first start with basically like what is consciousness? What does it mean to be a conscious human being? So within that first part, I use a lot of my psychology background.
Mhm.
Psychology talks about conscious states, different ways that we are in consciousness. So there's a lot of science that's connected with this. It's not just necessarily what you hear in the spiritual world, but there's a lot of that psychological science connected to what does it mean to be conscious. And then you go into, what is it that I have internally in me that I see as my light? What are my strengths? And there's some great tools out there that you can use called like Strengths Finder Survey, where then like kids and even people like in the corporate world and different industries, like I think it's important to start with what you know is your strength and not your deficit. We live in a world where the first thing we go to is, what am I not good at? Like that's not going to help you or anyone
Mhm.
else. Doesn't mean that we have narcissism and we think we're perfect and we have nothing to work on. But I think we need to start with like, what do we do well? Like, what is something that I see as a strength that I can then provide to my community? So, like, if I was a little girl and I had a survey like this, I would have been like, I love to talk to people. I love
Yes.
to make friends. I love design. Like, I love to design spaces. Like, I love to, go and walk in nature. And so you just start to find the things that are your joy, and they're usually linked with your strengths. And then from there, you build in your relationships with people. How do we build relationships with people? When there's people that you're working with, school and workplace, that you're like, our personalities don't really get along, but how can we find a way to have some common ground to work together? Because I believe anyone could work with anybody. You just have to find that common ground. And then take it from there. What is now my strength, my light? And now I'm building relationships with people. How do I collaborate and then bring that into the world as a service, right? You could have even kids in school starting to build their own businesses, starting to make their own nonprofits, and they can do it. And they're tapping into this more and more on social media. So we should be doing this also in
Yes, we
schools.
should. I was going to
Yes.
ask you, is this curriculum that you developed just for adults, or is this something that you're actually trying to get into the school system? Because listening to you talk
Yeah.
about it, this seems like something they should be doing with young kids and continue to do over time throughout elementary school,
Yeah.
middle school, and high school. These are actual ways to tap into someone's potential out here.
Mhm.
It's not just, and I know you focus on a lot on in emotional wellness, but this could actually give
Mhm.
kids insight to what they're good at and what they should be doing in life. That's really awesome.
Yeah, and it could be like, start with the schools, and then you bring also this to the workplace. Like, I think
Yes,
you have to have a system of holistic education, holistic workplace, right? What does it mean to also have like a holistic family and lifestyle? Because
yes.
the old kind of era energy was like, we have our jobs, we work, we bring home money, we pay bills. Well, that's not actually living holistically. Like, part of the
Mm-mm.
family should also be talking about like nutrition. How are we feeding our bodies well? How are we having, work-life balance? How are we doing things for our
How
emotional wellness? Like,
how I was just going to say, how are we
yeah,
balancing our emotions? That should be a
yeah,
topic that families discuss often. But another place where this
yeah.
curriculum could also be used is in places of worship, spiritual places of
Mm,
worship. This
yes,
could give so much insight into how your parishioners or your followers are thinking, what you could do to help them build in their
yeah.
own spiritual wellness.
I think so too. And I think that's a great idea, because I didn't even think about like places of worship, because I think something we also, of course, see in the world with division is religion, right?
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of polarity with religion, but there are also so many commonalities. And if you took like a curriculum like this and put it in a temple, put it in a synagogue, put it in
Put
a
it in a
church,
church. Yeah.
put it in, a spiritual center, and people are working on this to make themselves better people, then they could see the commonality. Like,
Yes.
I believe that the common goal is we all just want to do well in life for ourselves and then give to others, right?
That is true.
And that
That is
is
true.
part of almost any religion that you look at, is the same thing, is like, take care of yourself and then take care of others. And if we see that as really the recipe of life in schools, in workplace, in places of worship, in our home, is like, how do we take care of ourselves? Then how do we take care of others? And that's really it. And so you could definitely extend it to a lot of workplaces, but I think we do need to look at the way we do life in a more of a holistic way, and not just so transactional. Like, I do a job, I get money, I pay bills, and then I go and, I mean, that's very old, industrial revolution, like 20th century, even like 1800s, kind of way of thinking, or 2024. We are in an era, I believe, of consciousness. And then that part of consciousness is, how do we actually want to live and
Mhm.
thrive and be healthy human beings, and then actually help people, help other people. And then you're living in a world where people are healthy, and you have then probably healthier leaders, maybe
Yep.
healthier governments,
Yep.
it can just
So
extend outward.
one of my mantras is devoting my life to helping people get healthy, healed, and whole. And what
Mm,
you actually teach in your curriculum is a part of that. It's about being in a healthy mindset, living your life healthy across all spectrums. So I absolutely love that.
mm,
Now, I
mhm.
have a personal question for you. How do you maintain consistency in your motivation in your wellness routines, especially when life gets hectic or challenging, because you're taking on other people's emotional energy sometimes?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great question. Because, and you know what? You have to have grace with yourself. So the first thing I'm gonna say is that I'm not a superwoman, and I don't expect to be, and I don't see other people as that either. I think we have to have grace when we fall down and that we're not maybe taking care of ourselves. And again, that is a muscle as well, because when I slide off of my practice, like haven't done my walks in nature, haven't done my mantras, haven't done my meditation, and I'm getting a little like that sense of like frustration again and feeling a little like emotional and not taking care of it, I catch it faster because I've been doing this practice. So it's just being self-aware and just saying, you know what, I had a bad day, and I'm not going to let it get to me, but I'm going to recognize it and I'm going to start again and see each day as a fresh day. But you do have to, especially if anyone's in any kind of industry, spaces of service in any way, you do need to take care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You can't also, you're not really that credible if you are talking about wellness and you're not taking care of yourself. So you
Thank
have to walk
you.
the walk. You have to
Yes,
do it. But
that
it's
is one of the
okay.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
I am
It's okay.
always telling wellness
Walk the
coaches and
walk.
speakers that they have to walk the walk. You can't have followers and people looking at you, and you're not. For me, it's you're not taking care of your
Yeah.
physical wellness. That's very important.
Yes,
But
absolutely. So you got to
ma-
do that. Do it for
yes,
yourself to do it for others.
absolutely. Now, a lot of people struggle with self doubt and fear when they're starting their wellness journey. How do you help them overcome these feelings?
Self-doubt is a big one. I have it and I've had it a lot of my life. Like, it's called, like, they'll say this in like a lot of spiritual wellness work, the gremlin in your brain.
Mhm.
And my big one has been self-doubt. It's very natural to doubt yourself and to say like, I can't do this, or, I'm not going to get better, or I'm just in a funk and that's where I'm going to be. But again, call on your team, your people in your life to support you. When I'm having a self-doubt moment, I have a certain couple of people that I will message to and say, this is where I'm feeling right now. And they are like my cheerleaders, and they come back through and they're like, it's okay to be a little down, but you know your potential, you know who you are, you know your strengths. And it's like they just give it right back to me. So again, don't feel like you're alone. Use your resources, use your people in your life. But it is very normal to have self-doubt. You just don't want to stay in it. So the longer we stay in the self-doubt and the longer we stay in that kind of funky place, it's a lot harder to get out of it. So as soon as you again recognize like, oh, I'm having that moment of I can't do this, then it's like, okay, maybe I need to listen to like maybe a motivational song or a motivational talk, or maybe I do have that friend or someone that I know is my cheerleader. I found a lot of my cheerleaders again online. A lot of these people are not in my physical space. I do
Yeah.
have great family, but I have a lot of, these friends that I've made in these community spaces online, and I just call on some of them that I know will get me out of that little self-doubt kind of spiral. It's very common though. So again, grace with yourself. That is probably one of the most common things for humans, is to have self-doubt.
Awesome. Now, Gratitude is a powerful tool you frequently mentioned earlier. How can one cultivate a deeper sense of gratitude in their daily lives?
Yeah, I think journaling a gratitude like list. So I start off with my like daily journaling. I try to do it in the morning because then again you're starting the day with that. If
Mhm.
you don't have time for writing, again, maybe going through it like a prayer or a mantra while you're taking a shower, but just go through even like the top 5 things you're grateful for and try to switch it up. So don't have necessarily every day be the same 5 because then,
Yes,
I mean, there you could still have those things you're grateful for, but it allows you to expand what you're grateful for. So even if
absolutely.
it's like, I can breathe deeply today, whenever it's like the flu season and everyone's getting sick, and believe me, being in schools for a long time, had a lot of sickness. So whenever I'm like, I actually don't feel sick today. I could breathe well. My sinuses are great. I'm going to be grateful for that, right? I'm grateful for my delicious cup of coffee that I have. I'm grateful that I can go to the grocery store and buy the food that I can make for breakfast. I'm grateful even if you're having a stressful time at your job. I'm grateful that I have a job and I have a paycheck coming in. So, it's reframing it, and if you do that daily, it really does stay with you. It doesn't mean you're not going to have your moments, but it does stay with you and you tend to be more positive over time.
Absolutely. Now, you've created content across various platforms, including your podcast and YouTube. How do these platforms help you connect with your audience on emotional wellness topics?
Thank you. I found that I started with written posts. And so I would often write in almost like, I wouldn't say I'm a poet by any means, but kind of posting with like the emojis and having kind of like one line sentences of things that would be my authentic, kind of pondering, like whatever I'm like, if I'm thinking about, I want to talk about balance. I talked about that a lot this summer. And then I usually have like a picture that represents that. But now I've started to get into videos. I find videos really connect with people because
Yes.
they can see you being like you. You're very human. You're showing your voice. You're showing kind of like who you really are. And so I've been making these like little walking videos in nature because I'm also showing this is what I do to process my emotions. So not only am I giving you messages, like I don't just do it on like a Zoom background, but I'm like, this is what I'm actually doing it right now. So I'm giving you a message, but I'm also telling you about the process that I do to get to that better place of my emotional wellness. So I found that to be really helpful. The communities that like I have on LinkedIn, I try to be consistent. So being like a consistent with my posts. I have the group that I co-found with my friend Hope, the Teacher Circle. We try to be consistent with posting and really sharing a variety of different things we want to support like teachers and education. So we'll post articles. I often post about wellness. We have wellness Wednesdays, so I'll often post things that teachers can do for themselves, but also they can help with their students in the classroom. So I think just consistency, whether that's once a week, a couple times a week, but being again authentic and not making it so regimented in the sense that like I'm going to post this day, this day, this day, and I'm going to have it planned out. And this is what, and sometimes people need to do that with their schedule. But I think when you have something that comes to you and you're like, ooh, I want to share this, just do it. Just go out and share it.
Yes.
And people will know that you're being authentic and they're going to resonate with that. And then when people comment, as much as possible, I know we all get busy, but give the love back, right? Keep that momentum going. And that's how you also build that community, right? People want to see that you're responding to them and that you're reading their comments. But there's lots of ways that you can engage online. I love YouTube. And now I'm really getting into TikTok. And Instagram's great with also like I follow everything on my Instagram is like wellness and spirituality. So it's like I go on there and it's just positive. It just feels good. It feels like a feel good.
Yes.
So I don't feel like I'm scrolling and just looking at a bunch of, stuff that's like rotting my brain.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to wrap this up, you guys. Jackie, what's your final message or piece of advice that you would like to leave with our listeners who are looking to improve their emotional wellness?
Um, I would say that we're all a work in progress. No one is perfect, and that is not what we're trying to aim to be. We're just trying to be healthier each and every day. And so I just always say, like, take one little baby step, try one little thing out. So if you can take something away from this message today and you're like, you know what? I haven't been out in nature in a while. I think I'm just going to go for a walk today. That's your one thing. So I think everything in baby steps makes it manageable. And we all can do this. We all can be more healthy, and we can tap into our emotions, and we can have that emotional wellness. And I believe that we're all doing this together. So use your community. And thank you, everyone, for listening to my message today. Thank you, Cami, for having me on here. And I'm so excited for the Wellness Summit on December 14th.
Jackie, tell people how they can find you online.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. There, I'm Jackie Scully, MED. You can find me on Instagram, and that's jackie.c.scully. There's a lot of Jackie Scullys in the world, so you'll see I use my middle initial
I'm going to put
often.
all of this in the
Yeah.
description of the program as well. So you guys go out, and if you are not, you should join Facebook and join our group, the 10 Dimensions of Wellness,
Yes.
because Jackie is in there as well. And Jackie, I'm going to invite you to post some of those mantras you were talking about that you do in the shower in the group, so people can go ahead and start practicing that in advance.
Absolutely.
I love the fact that you said while you're in the shower, you're cleansing your body, you're cleansing your spirit, and you're also cleansing your mind.
Yeah.
That was so cool. So I'm going to invite you to post that in the group so that people can start utilizing some of the materials and some of the lessons that you taught us today.
Thank you so much. I'd love to do that. It's awesome.
Awesome. So much. All right. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the 10 Dimensions of Wellness. I cannot express how grateful I am that you all are here. This wraps up today's episode. A huge thank you to our VIP coach, and panelist Jackie Scully, for sharing her incredible insights with us. We hope you found today's discussion as inspiring and actionable as we did. As we prepare for for this year's virtual wellness summit, we are excited to keep bringing you conversations that empower you to live well in every dimension of your life. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with others who are on their wellness journey as well. Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for more details about the summit and how you can participate. It's going across the bottom of the screen. Until next time, remember, wellness isn't just a destination, it's a journey, and we're honored to be on it with you. Thank you for listening, and take care.